Jan mute li wile kute ala e Toki ona.
Toki Pona ne kreigis por pri paroli malsimplaj aferojn, ĝia kreinto diris tion.
Opinie utasina.
Jan pi Toki Pona li wile utala e ona tan ni. Ona li toki e lon. My opinion of Toki Pona is somewhat unique among people with my level of proficiency in it. While people who are skilled in the language tend to give it glowing reviews as a beacon of clarity, positivity, and cultural neutrality, in opposition to exclusion and opaque jargon, my opinion of it is perhaps better described as 1,000 hours played, not recommended. For the uninitiated, Toki Pona is a language which contains between 120 and 181 words depending on the source. These words tend to have a number of different but related meanings, which can be distinguished through word order, grammatical particles, and context, though most people only mention the latter. The original intent of the language was to encourage speakers to simplify their thinking by focusing on what's most important, but as time went on, it began to bill itself more and more as a general-purpose language that can do anything despite its small size. I'm sure a number of people are going to doubt that I really speak the language that well, and I don't blame them, since a lot of complaints about it come from beginners. So in order to let you judge for yourself, I translated the entirety of Tukuntu into English. I chose it because I couldn't find an existing translation. I couldn't even find a plot summary, and because when published it was the longest original work written in Toki Pona, while still not being too long. Now, I want to clarify that I don't mind people messing around with it if they want, and in fact, Toki Pona was the first language I actually managed to learn after a bunch of half-hearted attempts to learn other ones. Without it, I wouldn't have learned Esperanto to the level I have, or started learning Mandarin. It taught me how to learn languages, and for that it has value. All that being said, I still have more than a few bones to pick with this thing. Okay, so earlier I said that Toki Pona is meant to simplify thoughts by encouraging the user to discard unimportant information. So what does that look like in practice? Well, one example that comes up a lot is fruit. If there are a bunch of fruit, I can tell you which one I want by describing it by its unique traits. Let's say I want the banana, and it is the only curved yellow fruit available. Then I can just say I want the curved yellow fruit. The idea is that Toki Pona's vocabulary does this kind of thing with every word. Every word is general enough that it can be used like this. At least, that's the theory. And here's my first gripe. There are a number of times where, in contradiction to the language's goals, a speaker might actually be forced to describe something in more detail than they would like to, with no way of discarding those details even if they are unnecessary. Here's a few examples. Toki Pona does not have a general word for animals. Instead, you have to specify whether or not the given animal is a land mammal, a fish, a reptile, a bird, or a bug. The community is in clear agreement that soeli is not a general term for animals, so too bad, you have to pick one. It doesn't help that these terms require you to be specific even though they themselves are not specific. It's not hard to find people polling about whether or not X creature is this or that, and Toki Pona, a Toki Pona wiki, acknowledges that there are some edge cases. So you'll have to think about the irrelevant details in those situations. And the animal words are not alone in requiring precision. If you want to talk about things that are long or more accurately line-shaped, for example, you need to specify whether or not they are flexible, despite the fact that the language already has words for flexible objects, kind of, and hard objects. Similarly, if you want to talk about flat things, you have to specify if it's flexible or not, as before, but if it isn't flexible, you have to specify if it's horizontal or vertical. So much for doing away with the relevant details. That's about 8% of the original lexicon in the language of good. Now, I've seen these sort of criticisms before many times, so I already know what I'm going to hear from seasoned Toki Ponists. Well, Toki Pona isn't meant to be perfectly minimalist silly. It's meant to be a happy medium between minimal and comfortable. It's not trying to be as small as possible. But the thing is, that counter-argument only makes it worse. If it's okay for the language to have more words than it needs, then why are generic terms for these concepts not there? Best you can do for all animals is iyo, which can mean literally anything. My problem isn't the presence of these specific words, it's the absence of broader words. Including such words would be in line with the language's goals, and their absence works against them. And now that we're here, Let's talk about this balance between minimalism and practicality stuff. This seems to me to be a relatively recent phenomenon. The earlier you go in Toki Pona's history, the more honest the community seems to be about its potential shortcomings. But now there's a kind of insistence that Toki Pona can talk about anything, no matter how complex. I admit that while I do have gripes with Toki Pona as a philosophically minimalist language, there aren't that many. Just nitpicking about a couple of words and that's it. For the most part, Toki Pona succeeds at being a language that makes its users cut away details. But so does Ka, so I don't think this goal is particularly hard to achieve to begin with. The far more interesting claim is that Toki Pona is usable for anything. Now, spoiler alert, no. And yes, I already saw the talk about mostly Euclidean geometry, specifically the 5 postulates, which you can literally fit on 5 bullet points, where the only thing the whole video actually says about non-Euclidean geometries is that in one of them parallel lines get close to each other, in another they get away, and that the former is what happens on a globe, which was created just to prove a point rather than out of genuine interest. Alright, look, I will critique the language itself, but I kinda don't have to. There's this programming language called brainfuck, which is composed entirely of just 8 characters. Unlike with human languages, we can be completely sure that this language is capable of doing anything any other major programming language can, because it's Turing complete. In practice though, no reasonable programmer would ever use brainfuck for anything other than the challenge, because it's pretty much impossibly hard. Toki Pona and its Silk are the brainfuck of conlangs. Even if there was some way to show that Toki Pona really was just as capable as any other human language, I believe that it is too difficult in practice for serious general use, and I have some reason to think this. Discord sucks, don't use it, but in my experience, English use is much less common in the Esperanto Discord than in Mapona pi Toki Pona. Often proficient speakers choose English to speak with each other in that server. There are even separate servers for Toki Ponists who speak different natural languages, which is odd for a community that already shares one supposedly easy, neutral language. Meanwhile, the server where only Toki Pona is allowed is almost a ghost town by comparison. Look at Lipu Tempo. The zines themselves are entirely in Toki Pona, good, but on the side a couple of things, including this bit which addresses people who would already be able to speak the language very well, are only in English. Lipu Tempo itself was seemingly also only created to prove a point, and help get Toki Pona an ISO code. This is the Toki Pona census. 83.9% of people chose to participate in a language other than Toki Pona. A little math from my regular viewers shows that, of this 83.9%, about 76.6% of respondents say they know Toki Pona, yet they didn't pick it. And as far as I can tell, the census results themselves are only available in English, not Toki Pona, even for the older ones. Resources like Sonapona are only in English. What's the holdup? Going all in on using Toki Pona would ensure that the whole community can read these things, not just the English-speaking parts of it. And I thought Toki Pona was the easiest language and also often more clear than English, right? So what's the problem? My hunch is that it's not actually true. Toki Pona is too hard, and it's too hard because it's too small. Okay, that's enough of that. So what do I think is wrong with the language itself as a min-maxing attempt to be as practical as possible with as little as possible? Well, I happen to agree with proficient speakers that Toki Pona's vocabulary is surprisingly capable for its small size. My gripes lay primarily in the grammar. First of all, there's no relative clauses in the language. This made sense when the point of the language was just to think simply, but for a general-purpose minimal language, there's no reason to not have relative clauses. Pretty much every natural language has recursion, with only one contested case, and there are many times when I think of an easy way to describe something with a relative clause, but because I can't use relative clauses, I have to split things up into multiple sentences, use a potentially confusing P phrase, or append it as a new predicate on the noun, and hope that that's not misinterpreted. Maybe that's okay because something context, and because making new sentences is encouraged, but in that case, why are the prepositions like that? See, there are 5 random content words that can be used as verbs, nouns, or modifiers, that's what that means, which also function as prepositions. And the prepositional phrases they form are supposed to go at the end of predicates, even though they often modify the subject all the way at the start. The problem with this is that it makes sentences difficult to parse, and discourages making the most of the prepositions as content words because he risks strings of modifiers that use them being misinterpreted as containing a prepositional phrase. There's of course the classic example of yan lipana etomo tawasina. Is it a person gave away your car, or is it a person gives you a room? Or how about yan lilukina yan kepekenilo? Is it a person sees someone using a tool, or is it a person sees a user of a tool? I suppose you could clarify this with a comma, or by using that hideous Pona underlining thing, but exactly how these workarounds would transfer to the spoken language is unclear. Anyways, as I was gonna say, if split-up sentences and multiple predicates are just as good as relative clauses, then why even mandate putting prepositional phrases at the end? Why not just stick to constructions like yan li tawasina li pana etomo, or yan li kepekenilo li lukina yan, which are already grammatically correct? At least commit to your bad decisions. And at that point, why even have any prepositions rather than just normal verbs? To be fair, most prepositions take on different meanings when turned into transitive verbs, which saves on vocab, but there's a reason the use of kepeken as a transitive verb meaning to use refuses to die. Why should it be anything else? If you insist on having prepositions, it would have been nicer to have purely prepositional counterparts to these words which behave more like li or e, as it could have introduced more nuance into the language at a low vocab cost. But I guess having dedicated words for the official books is more important. Also, why is the particle be like that? Despite being taken from tokpisin bilong, the particle p is not a genitive. Instead, it is meant to regroup modifiers so you know, for example, that this word is modifying this word rather than this word, as it would be if p wasn't there. The thing is, though, with so few words and so much context dependence, you're going to want to make the most of what few particles you have. Despite this, the use of p is officially ungrammatical when you've only got 2 words. There's actually no reason to do this. Someone else pointed out that there is a big difference between yan pi soweli mute and yan soweli mute. But when you only have one soweli or one yan, the distinction suddenly disappears. Allowing p here would allow us to keep the nuance in this situation and others like it without making the grammar any more complicated, and it's pretty clear to me that such a usage would be intuitive to people, so why not allow it if practicality is a concern? And you know what else sucks? Forming chains of verbs. Currently there are a handful of preverbs that can take a verb after them. Then if you want to modify the verbs that come after them, you just add a word and that's an adverb now. The problem with this is that it makes it unclear how you should modify preverbs, while also restricting arbitrarily which chains of verbs you can make. Unless preverbs are a suggestion and any verb can function as a preverb, with context helping distinguish, but I can tell you from experience that this wouldn't always be reliable. A particle like be or a, or something, could have easily been used to get rid of this constraint. And to top it all off, there's this cute little quirk of the grammar, where any sentence of the form onali verb can simultaneously mean it does the verb or it has the verb done to it, with no single reliable way to specify the latter, because verbs as nouns can refer to the generic object of the noun and li doesn't specify the part of speech. And I've already talked about the garbage number system. Originally I was going to propose ke in this video, but I've decided it'd be weird to add a sincere nimisin proposal here, and the video is long enough without it, so that's why I made it separate. Anyway, circling back to the prepositions, I think I might have an answer for why they're like that, and it flies in the face of a claim I see a lot of Toki Ponists make, that their language is really good at being culturally neutral. Look, it's not Eurocentric. It has words from all over the world. We don't have any of those grammar features that are hard for non-Europeans. I've even heard some people say that the language would make a good international auxiliary language, despite the fact that it was not designed for that purpose and it's clearly unfit for it. Well, is Toki Pona really that neutral? I want you to imagine that you're trying to make a culturally neutral language with words from languages all across the world. But you're lazy and you don't actually want to go through the trouble of looking for them. So what you do is you just think of an English word, see if any languages borrowed it, then put that English word in a language, and say you really got it from that other language in order to make the language look more international than it really is. While I highly doubt that this was the actual thought process that went into putting together Toki Pona's lexicon, it might as well be, because the end result is the same. According to nimi.li, if I didn't make a mistake, I did this a while ago, these are all the source languages for Toki Pona's nimi kusuli. Looks nice and diverse, right? Well, it's misleading. One of the only 2 words in the language from Japanese is monsuta, and the only word from Tongan is kulupu. These words are transparently direct imports from English monster and group. The only thing Japanese and Tongan did was Toki Pona ahead of time, and that's just the beginning, because a lot of words are from Esperanto, which takes its words from European languages, and a whole lot of words are from Toki, which is an English-based Creole. So how do we account for this when examining the true neutrality of Toki Pona's lexicon? Well, I decided that if the source language of a word listed on nimi.li itself got the word from a colonial, European, or otherwise expansionist language, it would be reclassified as being from that language instead. After doing this, I managed to compile a new list of words based on their origin. The biggest group was Germanic languages, followed by Romance, except Spanish for some reason, even though Spanish is the most commonly spoken Romance language, then Finnish, then Slavic. Most of these words are Indo-European, and they are all culturally from Europe. The next biggest group is Sinitic, with only 10 words despite there being a ton of Chinese speakers. I lumped these 10 together as being from non-European sources, though I guess Yasima is a little up to debate. Then we have Georgian, onomatopoeia, a priori words, Greek, and finally Celtic. The final count? 106 of the 137 Nimi Kusuli, or about 77.3%, are of European origin, with more than half being specifically Indo-European. The remaining 22.7% of words are not particularly good either. There is only a single word from Hindi despite there being a ton of Hindi speakers, and despite Arabic also having a ton of speakers, there are exactly 0 words from Arabic. And from the few Chinese words, gon sounds too much like go and not enough like kong qi. Dan doesn't sound like cung, and while we're at it, suna doesn't sound like sun. So there you go. The lexicon fails at equal representation because it's still heavily biased towards Europe, and it fails at maximizing recognition because a lot of the remaining words are still obscure. Now maybe you think that's not bad, since there's so few words that they might as well all be a priori. But then why not just make them a priori? Then everything would clearly be neutral, and you wouldn't have ridiculous situations like kalama and kalama, mani and mani, mamama and mamama, utala and utala. And then there's the unenviable soweli lilili lisui, which makes tsi blush. I mean, if Toki Pona had a lot of words, I'd get it, but it doesn't. This was completely avoidable. But hey, I guess if it makes a language sound cute, it's fine. Huh. Well anyways, the grammar. The default, or perhaps I should say, the only word order in Toki Pona is subject-verb-object. Cross-linguistically, this is only the second most common word order, despite the fact that the system of particles in Toki Pona could theoretically allow a subject-object-verb word order without much issue, at least for sufficiently simple sentences. So far, such a method of speaking has only been proposed as a joke that should not actually be used. And circling back to those awful prepositions, do you want to know why I suspect they are the way they are, even though they don't fit with the rest of the language for the reasons I've already explained? Well, I suspect they're like that, because that's how English and French do it. There's also the fact that not every language has prepositions. Some have postpositions, and even some languages with prepositional phrases may put them before the main verb, not after. So the fact that Toki Pona has them, even though it could have conceivably done without, is a hit to its claim to neutrality. I do admit the phonology's pretty good though. I could talk about how Mandarin doesn't have gi, and si is pronounced more like s. English doesn't have o as a monophthong, velarizes its l's and aspirates its stops in these syllables, and how many dialects of Spanish, including my own, render y as y, and others even as a ja or ja. So now the top 3 languages are excluded, and allowing for a variation is bad because it would create a divide in the speaking community where you can immediately tell what a person's first language is based on how they pronounce the sounds, but I won't because that's not a real problem. Anyways, we're almost at the end of the video now, fortunately. I'm just glad the most controversial part is behind us. I mean, I don't imagine I'll say anything more controversial than what I did about Toki Pona. So let me just check the script here and what the fuck? Meli tonsi li meli. Mie tonsi li mie. Yan tonsi li meli ala li mie ala. Wait a second. So, before I get into what I actually want to talk about with Tonsi, I have to bring up the fact that a sizable amount of the community uses to refer to both non-binary people and binary trans people. While this isn't totally non-controversial, it strikes me as odd that this is so widely accepted, given that it results in people who are very clear about being men or women getting lumped in with people who are very clear about not being men or women. Look, it even affects the way the community presents its data. But even if you can put that aside as no big deal, consider this. People often knock on the way Esperanto as it's originally described it treats gender, calling it sexist because it treats men as default. Okay, let's accept that. I get it. Let's remember how the system works though. In Esperanto, as conceived by Zamenhof, words referring to people have their default form used for men, and in order to specify women, you add the in suffix. Now, for situations where gender is unknown or unimportant, you can use the default form of the word for those situations too, as Zamenhof describes here. Let us now examine Tonsi a little more closely. In Toki Pona, as it currently works in practice, words referring to people have their default form used for cis people, and in order to specify trans, you add the word Tonsi. Now, for situations where being trans is not known or unimportant, you can use the default form of the word for those situations too. My question then is this. If this is not okay because it's sexist, then is this not also bad? Wouldn't it be cisnormative? And what exactly should be done about it? Adding a new word would clutter the lexicon even more, but getting rid of Tonsi would be unfair. Maybe the problem with Esperanto is that some words are explicitly basically male. But if that's the only problem, then you can just make new roots, 100% Fundamento approved, no new suffixes required. So if this system is bad, how is Toki Pona's system not also bad? So, yeah, I don't really know how to end this video. There's a few more points I would have liked to add, but this video's long enough. To be honest, the more I got into Toki Pona, the more I started liking it less and less. It's not very much like any other language in its refusal to grow, and context isn't as reliable as it's made out to be, so as a result you get a misguided community that thinks Toki Pona is something it's not. Don't get me wrong, it's still a fine language, but there's so much there that would be so easy to fix. Mika matawa mapito kipona La mika masona e ike Toki ni lipakala Lisama ampat Tasoyan liawen mu eona Pakalala iyo pokao Ken laona liwe ka e ike Pakalatan ke lipini Yalan ke nala sonaeni Otawawaso opowe ala sina ke nala ni Ninsona ala eto kisina lonin salawami Otawawaso lon serilaso o piline suno Tempo kamala milonin sapi maepelan tuyo Nia maestro, Zamcio, nia aminda kaj amenda Dio, nia diligenta kolegaro de pacaj batalantoj kaj esperemaj samideanoj neniam laciĝos ĝis la fina venko de la interna ideo, kiu ĉiutage plibaldaŭiĝas. Ĉiuj preĝos al vi, ĉiuj parolos nur Esperanton, la tuta mondo estos unu lando kaj unu popolo, kaj ĉiuj amos vin. Muahahahahaha. Muahahahahaha.